A mass exodus at the Department of Justice. Thousands of prosecutors are leaving. But here's the catch. It's not for the reason you think. The Trump administration is facing chaos. And this isn't just about resignations. It's about power, loyalty, and a battle over the very heart of the DOJ. Why is this happening now? And what does it mean for you? In a moment, we'll reveal how this shakeup could rattle the entire foundation of federal law enforcement. But first, let's dive into the explosive details behind the story that's rocking the DOJ. What's unfolding at the Department of Justice is more than just an ordinary shakeup. We're talking about nearly 3,000 prosecutors, a number so staggering it's hard to ignore. But this isn't just about people quitting. It's part of a larger pattern. Take a look at what's been happening. At least 6 prosecutors in Minneapolis, 4 more at the main DOJ, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. The real story is what's behind these departures. This isn't just about job dissatisfaction. It's about being asked to prosecute cases that many of these lawyers simply won't touch. What does that signal for the integrity of the DOJ? Now ask yourself this: if the very people entrusted with enforcing the law can't work under this regime, what happens to the rest of us? This isn't just internal drama. It's a crisis in how justice is being served, and it's happening right now. Here's the cold truth. These departures aren't just coincidences. They're a direct response to what's happening inside the Trump administration. When Pam Bondi, a key figure in the regime, starts publicly calling out the DOJ lawyers who quit, she paints them as woke and unpatriotic. She claims they turned their backs on law enforcement, on ICE no less. But here's the kicker. These same prosecutors had been handling serious fraud cases like the one in Minneapolis that supposedly mattered so much to the regime. So why push them out now? Notice what's missing here: a clear answer. It's not just about loyalty to ICE. It's about forcing these lawyers to bend to a political agenda they couldn't follow without compromising their own principles. What happens when the very people sworn to uphold justice can't even stay in their jobs? The situation is getting worse, fast. We're not just talking about a few resignations here and there. This is a systemic breakdown. Across the country, prosecutors are being forced out, replaced by anyone willing to carry out whatever orders come from the top. The consequences, they're starting to show. In Minnesota, Governor Tim Walz and Mayor Jacob Frey are now facing criminal investigations. Why? Because of their public support for peaceful protesters pushing back against ICE's actions. In other words, defending free speech has now become a criminal act. This isn't an isolated incident either. It's part of a disturbing trend. Think back to past moments when the power of the DOJ was weaponized for political gain. Remember when it was used to settle scores instead of uphold the law? The line between law enforcement and political power has been blurring for years, and now we're seeing the full impact. And here's where things really escalate. What happens when even the most basic protections for freedom of speech start to get attacked? It's not just about the firing of prosecutors anymore. What's unfolding is much deeper. When we look at the reasons behind these resignations, it's clear what these lawyers were asked to do was crossing a line. Prosecutors were ordered to push forward investigations against the widow of a victim, a case that should have been a priority for any law enforcement agency. Instead, they were forced to abandon it for political reasons. Now, compare this to what Pam Bondi and others are saying. These lawyers didn't support ICE enough. But let's take a step back. When was the last time any of these figures cared about the actual law? When was the last time political motivations weren't driving these decisions? This contradiction is the heart of the issue. These prosecutors didn't quit out of convenience. They resigned because they were being asked to do something that violated their professional integrity. And when you force out the ones who have the courage to stand up, you're left with something far more dangerous: a Department of Justice that no longer answers to the law, but to political power. It's happening all at once now. First, you have top DOJ prosecutors resigning, unwilling to carry out politically motivated orders. Then you've got the criminal investigations targeting local leaders who dared to defend their citizens' rights to protest. And now there's the push to replace those prosecutors with anyone who will follow orders, no matter the cost to justice. It's a full-on collapse in real time. This isn't just about one office or one state. It's a pattern that's repeating itself across the country. What happens when law enforcement can no longer act independently? What happens when the system meant to protect you is turned into a political weapon? And here's the real question. What happens if this continues? The pressure is mounting and the risk is real. If the rule of law is manipulated like this, it doesn't just affect prosecutors, it affects everyone. Now let's bring this down to reality. This isn't just a political squabble between powerful figures. This is about real people living real lives, facing the consequences of a broken system. Think about the individuals in Minnesota who are being targeted simply for doing their jobs. Governor Walz and Mayor Frey were standing up for their citizens' right to protest, a right guaranteed by the First Amendment. Yet now they're under investigation by the very institution that's supposed to protect these freedoms. And what about the prosecutors who resigned? These aren't just faceless bureaucrats. They're professionals who took an oath to uphold the law. They left not because they didn't want to do their jobs, but because they were asked to betray their ethical standards and the very essence of justice. If this feels familiar, say so in the comments. The idea that justice is being held hostage by politics isn't just an abstract concept. It's happening right now to real people in real communities. This isn't just about isolated incidents or personal vendettas. What we're witnessing is a breakdown of the system that's supposed to safeguard justice. Why is this happening? The answer lies in the dynamics of power, leverage, and fear. Look at how easily the DOJ has become a tool for political agendas. When prosecutors are forced to leave, it's not just because of disagreements, it's because the system itself has been twisted. In this new reality, the DOJ no longer acts as an impartial institution. It's become a weapon to push specific narratives. And here's where it gets chilling. This is not an accident. The system has been designed to function in a way that allows this kind of manipulation. Fear of losing their jobs, political pressures, and a constant push from above create a perfect storm. What happens when the very institution meant to hold power accountable is itself compromised by that power? This isn't about one regime or one political party. It's about a dangerous shift in how our system of justice works or doesn't. Looking ahead, there are two possible paths this could take. On one hand, the public could push back hard enough to demand reform. The pressure could force lawmakers, officials, and the courts to restore some level of integrity to the DOJ, ensuring that it serves the people, not political interests. But even then, the damage done in the past few years might be too deep to undo easily. On the other hand, the momentum could keep going in the same direction. If the system continues to bend to political will, we could see more of the same. More resignations, more politicized investigations, and a complete breakdown of trust in our legal institutions. The path we're on now could become the new normal, and the question then becomes, what happens when the DOJ is fully turned into a political tool with no checks left? The next move is already in play. We're seeing it unfold piece by piece, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The system is teetering on the edge, and only time will tell which way it will fall. Here's the bottom line. What we're witnessing isn't just a crisis of leadership. It's a crisis of integrity. The very institution tasked with protecting justice is being manipulated, twisted, and weaponized for political gain. And when those who uphold the law are silenced or forced out, it's not just a few prosecutors who lose. We all lose. This story changes everything. It forces us to question not just the people in power, but the systems that allow them to act with impunity. What happens next will shape the future of justice in America. Will the system fight back, or will we see a permanent shift toward political control? One thing is clear. This story is far from over. So make sure you're following, because we'll be here to break down the next chapter as it happens.